Leigh Touchton, the NAACP, and the battle over the Kendrick Johnson narrative. When people talk about the death of Kendrick Johnson, they often focus on the gymnasium at Lowndes High School, the wrestling mats, and the controversial ruling of positional asphyxia. But there is another part of this story that deserves attention. The battle over the narrative that unfolded in the Valdosta community after Kendrick's death. And one of the central figures in that narrative battle was Leah Touchton. Now, truth seekers, let's ask, who is Leah Touchton? Leah Touchton was not simply a citizen commenting from the sidelines. She was a longtime figure in Valdosta's civil rights community. Touchton served 4 terms as president of the Valdosta-Lowndes County NAACP chapter, and later served as secretary of the organization. Because of her leadership role in the NAACP, she became involved in reviewing the circumstances surrounding Kendrick Johnson's death shortly after the tragedy occurred in January 2013. According to her own public statements, Touchton began examining the case in April 2013, only a few months after Kendrick's body was discovered. Her involvement was not passive. Touchton stated that she conducted interviews with individuals connected to the case, submitted open records requests for investigative documents, reviewed portions of the case file after the investigation closed, toured the gymnasium at Lowndes High School where Kendrick's body was found, visited the crime laboratory connected to the investigation, spoke with law enforcement and other officials. Touchton also participated in a conference call with Georgia NAACP leadership, which included Kendrick Johnson's parents and their attorney, to discuss the case and the civil rights concerns surrounding the investigation. But a major turning point occurred within the NAACP itself. As the controversy surrounding the case grew nationwide, leaders within the Georgia NAACP began expressing support for the Johnson family and raising concerns that Kendrick Johnson's death may have involved foul play. Touchton publicly disagreed with that position. She stated that based on the material she reviewed, she believed the evidence supported the official ruling that Kendrick Johnson died from positional asphyxia. According to her own statements, when the Georgia NAACP moved toward publicly characterizing the case as a murder investigation, Touchton and several members of the Valdosta NAACP branch chose to resign. They stated they refused to accuse individuals of murder when they believed the evidence did not support that claim. This resignation marked a major moment in the narrative battle surrounding the case, because from that point forward, Touchton became one of the most visible voices arguing that the investigation had reached the correct conclusion. Touchton later made a public statement explaining why she rejected the murder theory. She argued that for Kendrick Johnson to have been murdered and for a cover-up to exist, more than 100 people would have to be lying and telling the same story for years, risking their careers, retirement, and even criminal prosecution. But when the case record is examined closely, the issue is not that everyone told the same story. The issue is that many of the stories do not match. Witness statements describe different details about the scene. Some witnesses referenced multiple shoes near the mats, while crime scene photographs appear to show something different. Emergency response reports reference cardiac arrest, yet other statements indicate Kendrick was already clearly deceased when his body was discovered. Timelines, observations, and descriptions do not always align. And when statements contradict one another in a death investigation, investigators and the public naturally begin asking questions. Touchton also argued that the medical evidence only supports positional asphyxia. The original autopsy conducted by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation ruled Kendrick's death positional asphyxia. However, a later independent autopsy commissioned by the Johnson family concluded that the injuries observed were consistent with blunt force trauma. 2 medical opinions, 2 interpretations, and that disagreement is one of the reasons the case continues to be debated more than a decade later. Touchton's role in the narrative surrounding the case expanded further in 2015. That year, Kendrick Johnson's parents filed a $100 million wrongful death lawsuit naming several defendants, including Brian Bell and his brother, along with their father and other individuals. At the time, Brian Bell had received a football scholarship offer from Florida State University. But when the lawsuit became national news, Florida State withdrew the scholarship. In response, a group of supporters traveled to Tallahassee, Florida, to meet with Florida State University officials in an effort to convince them to restore Brian Bell's scholarship. Among those supporters was Leigh Touchton. According to reporting from Valdosta Today, 9 people from Georgia participated in the meeting with Florida State University President John Thrasher and other officials. Touchton later said the group spent nearly 2 hours discussing the situation. Ultimately, the university chose not to reinstate the scholarship. Touchton strongly criticized the Johnson family's lawsuit. She described it publicly as not only frivolous, but malicious. She also argued that the accusations against the Bell family had damaged the reputation of an innocent teenager, and said she chose to advocate for the family because she believed civil rights protections apply to everyone. By this point, the Kendrick Johnson case had become something much larger than a local investigation. It had become a battle over narrative. One narrative held that the investigation was flawed and that serious questions remained unanswered. The other narrative held that the investigation was thorough and that innocent people were being falsely accused. Leigh Touchton became one of the most visible voices representing the second position, and the Valdosta community became deeply divided. Recently, Ms. Touchton took to social media and accused the Johnson family and supporters, including myself, of exploiting Kendrick Johnson's death for money and spreading false narratives. Those are serious accusations, and since they were made publicly, they deserve a public response. Because asking questions about a death investigation is not exploitation. It is accountability. So, Ms. Touchton, let me ask you something directly. You were a civil rights leader in this community. You served 4 terms as president of the Valdosta NAACP. You reviewed the case file. You conducted interviews. You toured the gymnasium and the crime lab. You participated in discussions with NAACP leadership. You resigned when the organization chose to characterize Kendrick Johnson's death as a possible murder. You later defended the official narrative. You publicly advocated for the Bell family. And you even traveled to Florida State University to defend a scholarship for one of the individuals accused in the Johnson family's lawsuit. Now you have chosen to accuse the Johnson family and those asking questions of exploiting tragedy. So here is my final question. If the investigation into Kendrick Johnson's death is truly as clear and settled as you say it is, why refuse the opportunity to discuss the evidence publicly? Because I have invited you on my platform multiple times, and those invitations have never been accepted. So the invitation still stands. Come on the show. Let's discuss the timelines. Let's discuss the contradictions. Let's discuss the evidence and let the public decide where the truth really lies. Because when a 17-year-old young man dies under controversial circumstances, silence does not bring justice, but transparency just might. Justice is coming for Kendrick Leigh Touchton. The chains are being lifted off of Valdosta, Georgia. The spirit of fear has broken, and witnesses are coming forward. KJ's army will not stop until justice is served. Justice for Kendrick Lamar Johnson.
Hey, yo, hold up. Leigh Touchton, you made a understanding about me and about this case. You said the idea of foul play would mean over 100 people would have to be lying and telling the same story. But if someone really reviewed the files in this case, they would know something different. Because the problem isn't that everyone told the same story. The problem is everyone told different ones.
You made a statement about me and about this case. You said the idea of foul play would mean over 100 people would have to be lying and telling the same story. But if someone really reviewed the files in this case, they would know something different. Because the problem isn't that everyone told the same story. The problem is everyone told different ones, different timelines, different witness statements, different reports. So tonight we addressing that, not with rumors, not with speculation, but with the fact, KJ's Army. Let's talk about this false premise.
False premise, Touchton said it, listen. 100 people lying, now the stories all different. Different witnesses talking, different timelines written. You said everybody's same, but the facts inconsistent. False premise, yeah, the truth persistent. KJ's Army in the streets, and we still not finished. We said they said everybody's same,
they said 100 people lying, that's the narrative they pushing. But the case file show a maze, and the timeline got them crooked. Witness saying one thing, report saying another. Evidence described different from the photo that they cover. Statement shifting over years, details changing position. If the story was the same, there would be no contradiction. But the deeper that you read, you see the fractures in the system. Truth don't hide forever when the record's contradicted.
False premise, Touchton said it, listen. 100 people lying, now the stories all different. Different witnesses talking, different timelines written. You said everybody's same, but the facts inconsistent. False premise, yeah, the truth persistent. KJ's Army in the streets, and we still not written. She said every doubt I'm done. She let me give the bit. You said everybody's same, but the facts inconsistent. Leigh Touchton, listen close, it's a response to what you said. You spoke my name in accusations, now I'm speaking truth instead. You claim 100 people lying, that's the picture you present. But the records show a puzzle full of cracks in every segment. Witness statements disagree, timelines breaking apart. Evidence descriptions don't match what we see in the charts. This ain't hating, it ain't drama, it's a question about truth. When the facts collide with stories, people start to ask for proof. This ain't about clout, this ain't about noise, this is about truth. When a 17-year-old loses his life, people have the right to ask questions. And when statements don't match, those questions don't disappear, they get louder.